Are you a woman who is going through a divorce and maybe can't afford a lawyer? Did you know that you can use AI to help you to defend yourself? That's our topic today in this episode. You're going to want to listen in if this is pertinent to you or maybe one of your friends. Hello, lovely dynamic women. Welcome to the Dynamic Women Podcast. I am Diane Rolston, your host, and I have the founder of Alice in Legal Wonderland, Ana. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Why don't you share a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about your business?
Absolutely. So I, like many women, many going through kind of a tough divorce, luckily the timing of when I began going through divorce really aligned with kind of the emergence of AI technologies. And of course, I realized that I was not financially capable of paying for a lawyer for the entire process. I've spoke to a lot of friends and colleagues, and they gave me kind of an idea of what this whole thing would be and how much it would be, and I realized it was not affordable for me. And so I looked to what is out there that I could use to help myself and to still try to represent myself as effectively and efficiently as I possibly could, given what I have access to and what I could afford. And so I essentially self-represented in my case, which was kind of a 3-year process. And then I went to trial and did the trial myself. Of course, I got, all the quotes and all the things that I needed and realized that trial would have been between 120 to 140,000. So it's not really something that most people would want to spend, even if they had the money. But then realistically speaking, if you look at what your settlement would be, and as a percentage of it, I realized that was just not realistic for me. So I knew I had to empower myself, really do a lot of research and do the best that I could with the resources and the contacts that would be willing to help me for free.
Wow. This is a really amazing company and service that you're offering. And I also just have to bring it back to how we met. So we are at the Web Summit right now, and the other night they do an evening event. And so it's just like tons of people and everybody's walking around and chatting and having drinks and checking out whatever's happening. And I'm in line and Ana runs up to me and says, because I have a media pass on, and she says, what was it? What's your angle, or what stories are you looking for?
Yes, that's right.
And I was like, wow, look at you just running up to me. And I said, I'm looking for female founders. And I looked at the company name on your name badge, and that was another company. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that, because that's connected to yours.
Yes, absolutely. So in founding Alice in Legal Wonderland, which is for self-represented litigants who want to use AI, I don't have a technology background. I'm not a developer. So I had to find partnerships of existing AI companies who have already built something, already have some functioning product that would be able to go through all the legal stuff and the databases and the content and the data and be able to parse it and make sure that whatever it is that I would be using or incorporating into my platform doesn't, make mistakes or introduce lies or fake cases or any of these stories that you hear out there in Canada and the US. We've heard about a lot of cases where even law firms are filing things with lots of errors and hallucinated, made-up cases that don't even exist. I actually just read about something 3 weeks ago where a big New York-based law firm submitted filings with multiple hallucinated, non-existent cases. So I was really keen on finding partners that have already kind of solved the issue of hallucination when it comes to legal citations and doing the legal research. So I've actually partnered with 2 companies. One company is archivist.io. So they have a layer that verifies the output before the output is given to people to make sure it's true and real. And then formic.ai, which has a really good user interface that's already built that people can go there and do information retrieval and find cases. And it's presented in a way that, is easy for people to understand, not just machines. So those are the partnerships that I sought out. And of course, I wanted to, partner and help out with one of the companies here at Web Summit. So they were going, and I was like, well, I'll help volunteer and help out with the event if I could also, kind of pitch my project.
And you did.
And I did.
And here we are.
Yes, yes, yes.
I love that because a lot of my listeners, they are female business owners or they're in their career and they have to be able to speak up. So how are you able to find these companies that are really complementary to what you're doing and co-support? How did you find them, and how did you approach them to be able to be like, let me use your code or let me use your platform?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
So I'm lucky to have a partner who's in the tech field, and he kind of knows a lot of people who are developers, and he's involved in a lot of projects. So he was willing to connect me with people and basically piggyback off of them and make these MOUs and agreements and say, hey, if you help me with this, we can have either profit sharing or MOUs and agreements of what would how that would look like in the future and how you would be involved. Because at the end of the day, these people who are working in AI right now as researchers, developers, they're so high in demand. They're so expensive. Like the salaries are just astronomical, not something I would be able to afford. So I just use the networks that I have, and I just do, the best I can with like pitching the why of the product and how it's so necessary right now. Because I don't know if you know, but there's over 700 different AI tools that are for lawyers and for law firms. But for self-represented litigants, there's probably less than a dozen out there that I've even seen. So the market is hugely underserved. And I know in Canada, from what I've read, it's about 80% of all family law cases feature at least one self-rep. So there's a huge demand, and it's just not being serviced at all. And, there's free legal clinics, there's legal aid and all these things, but they only service the most lowest income people. Yeah. The majority, or what I'd like to call the middle or the forgotten middle, is, just moms and, people who maybe have assets, maybe have a house, but they don't have enough that it's worth paying $140,000 plus for your case, right? Yeah. So I really saw that gap, and after going through my own case and my own trial, trying to use whatever tools I could pay for and use myself that I could access as a non-lawyer, I realized that there has to be a package and a platform that's specifically designed for self-reps to be able to have it as easy as possible, plain language as possible, and then accurate as possible as well. Because if you just go to ChatGPT, like, I don't know if the audience knows, but it can make up stuff and lie and make mistakes. So it's not 100% reliable to just do that. You can't just pull the output and just file it and think it's right.
Yeah, the hallucinations are really bad. And it's different. If you're going to make a social post and quote a fact that's not actually a fact, it's not going to harm you probably, but to do it in a court case, you definitely cannot. Now, your trial was 11 days long, but over 3 years.
So the entire process from the time I started the filing for contested divorce to the point in time where I got my trial decision, it was about 3 years,
But then you were in it 11 days.
Right.
What led you to represent yourself but using AI tools? Like, how'd you even believe you could do that?
Well, I did, I'm not gonna lie, I did get quotes from lawyers, because a lot of people told me, they're like, this is really hard, Ana. You've never gone to trial. The lawyer you're facing is a 16-year at the bar lawyer. He's probably done a lot of trials. And, so I did get quotes, and because of the price point was just so astronomical. And, at the same time, I did hire lawyers for piecemeal things. So, one hearing here, one hearing there, and I saw how much the costs were. There were upwards of $5,000 to $10,000 per hearing with the prep. So I already knew that it would be kind of out of my reach, and I wouldn't want to, how many mothers want to spend both their kids' education fund on a divorce? You just don't want to do that. That's why what ends up happening is a lot of people who are the disadvantaged party, let's say the one not in control of all the assets, which oftentimes happens to be the woman, unfortunately, they just say, oh, whatever, I'm just going to let it all go. Like, I'm just not going to fight for it and that's really, really unfortunate because the accumulation of wealth over decades, it's from both parties' efforts, right?
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
both parties' involvement. And maybe the wife stayed home and took care of the children, but then she gave up her career. So why should she be penalized and not get, 50% of the
Exactly.
of the assets, the house, whatever it is that you're kind of trying to settle. So I felt that I had to do it. It was a necessity. And, I also fully acknowledge that, I have a university degree, like I've worked in government for almost 2 decades. I know how policies, frameworks, and laws work. I have a lot of, I would say, above average knowledge of how the legal system actually works. So I understand that a lot of people don't have that, and maybe they're in completely different industries that are not related, and they've never been exposed to law in their entire lives. So then I realized that there's a huge gap. And every time I would talk about my case and share with people, and people would talk to me, oh yeah, my friend went through divorce, or I went through divorce 5 years ago, or whatever it is, the stories were always pretty bad. Like, they were really bad.
So you saw the need.
Yeah, I saw the need, and I saw that a lot of people were suffering, and a lot of people were basically disadvantaged. They could have done better if they had a tool that was specifically designed for self-reps who can't afford a lawyer or not in position to hire a lawyer, but don't qualify for legal aid. And, it was just really, really sad. Like, I was at that stage where I was talking to everybody about it, right? Trying to get advice, trying to get input, and everybody was throwing different things at me. And I just kind of had to sift through it and really just, I did, not gonna lie, I paid for the top AI tools I had access to. So at the time it was ChatGPT Pro, which was $300 a month. That was still way less costly than what lawyers are, which is typically $300 to $700 an hour, depending how senior the person is, right?
Makes
So
sense.
at the end of the day, it was still a lot more affordable and usable. And I was lucky that I had a partner who was in tech and who could, help me improve my prompts and help me get a better answer out of the systems that I had access to at the time. Again, this would have been a year ago, right, that I went to trial. So since then, I find, though, that technology has really progressed and improved. And so now we're in the position where we can build a platform that's more optimized for self-reps and that could actually serve them even better. And the way that I can help with that is because I went through the whole cycle myself and did trial myself. So
So you know where the gaps are, you know what needs to happen.
Exactly. Plus, I have my whole trial transcript. So, unfortunately, I don't know how much the audience knows about what it's like to be able to buy your own trial transcript. You have to use a certified transcriber offered by the courthouse.
No.
Yes, and
You can't
the
just put
cost.
Otter on.
No. You can't just. No.
Record it.
It's not, you can't record. You're not permitted to record in hearings. And my trial, because of the length, is $15,000, right? Just to purchase
For
the
11
transcript.
days of
11 days of transcription.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's intense. But I'm sure that's helping in your business now that you have that, because that can actually be a case study and show it.
Absolutely. And it could be studied, I said this and the ruling came out as that. And then, what's happening? Like, is this something that's correct in accordance with the law, or is it appealable? Like, should I appeal that?
Right.
So
'cause
those
you
are
can go back and double check it and throw it through AI again. Yeah.
Exactly. And now
Yeah.
AIs have improved. So, and then now we have that layer that wasn't there before.
Exactly.
That can double check, make sure that it's not lying.
Wow, amazing. And just so all of our listeners know, this can be used by men and women.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we are, like, you pick your market. You've picked your market based on who you are.
Yes.
And based on the stats being that it is typically more women. So let's look at actually the court case, because that's kind of like, I don't know, the exciting or scary part. You had mentioned to me when we talked the other night about how you corrected the judge 3 times.
Yeah.
Share a little bit more about that, because
absolutely.
that takes confidence in not only you, but in the material you have, the AI tool to help you do that.
Right. Okay. So This is going to get a little legalese technical, but I'm going to try to break it
Dumb
down
it
as
down.
simple as possible.
Yeah.
So in law, there's this thing called a request to admit. It's not just in family law, that's applicable in other types of law as well. But in family law, what it essentially is you send your opponent a list of questions that you know to be true and that you have a supporting piece of document to prove that it's true, such as, a financial statement, a text message, an email you sent your ex where they responded and confirmed something, any kind of supporting document, a video, anything that you have that supports that is true, that you know it to be true. So, essentially what I did is I kind of maximized the use of that as much as I could. It was court ordered, so in my hearing just before trial, where the administrative judge prepares you for trial and says, okay, you need to do these things in order to be finally ready for your trial date. Here's your trial date, kind of thing. So it's called the trial management conference. So during that conference, the judge ordered, because I requested, I wanted the request to admit to be a requirement to ensure that my ex would answer them, right? So, I just took it to another level, and it's not typically what lawyers do. Lawyers don't want to ask the opposing party hundreds and hundreds of questions with all the supporting documents, because then that narrows the whole trial. Then the trial won't be 10, 12, 11, whatever, however many days. Right. It'll just be 2 or 3 days, because the entire answers, all the answers have already been answered to. And there's also specific rules within the family law rules, and we're talking about Ontario here, so again, it could be different in other jurisdictions, but of how something needs to be denied. And if it's not properly denied, what happens is that question then becomes a fact automatically by operation of law. Not a judge has to decide if that's a fact or not. It automatically should become a fact within the case without a judge really looking at it and nuancing and deciding if it is or not. So I used that extensively. I sent my ex nearly 300 questions like that, supported by 104 documents, and he responded to only 15, and denied them in a blanket way, like, these are lies, with no supporting document of his own, no specific rationale left as to why this is false. And it was examples of things like, on this date on this year, did you spend $5,000 at Home Depot, right? Like questions like that, right? And then, did you purchase that using our joint line of credit after separation? Things like that, right? Those are just examples. And they have to be things that are non-disputable. They can't be like, the color of the sky was purple that day. Like, we're not sure. Like, we don't have any evidence to support what the color.
But you got the credit card
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to have the evidence. And the way that works as well is that all the documents that are attached to a request to admit have to then become part of the evidence docket of the trial, and they have to be admitted as authentic, meaning not forged, not fake, true documents, right? So that's what I did, and like I said, the administrative judge ordered us to do them. She gave me the same amount of time to ask my ex, and the same amount of time for him to ask me, all before trial. So he completely ignored that, and he didn't ask me any requests to admit, because of course his lawyer didn't want him to narrow the issues for trial. He wanted to maximize the maximum
to the
possible.
11 days.
Yeah, because he was making almost 10 grand per day, right? So
that's a huge tip.
Exactly.
For people.
Huge tip. If people can request in advance of their trial, if they know they're going to end up going to trial, because, you have a lot of disputes, nobody's settling, nobody's willing to settle, or one party is, submitting a bunch of stuff that's completely absurd, and you're like, I can't agree to these numbers, they're mathematically impossible, or stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Where everyone's butting heads, and you can't settle with a person who's being irrational, right? So then what happens is you need to advocate for yourself, and you need to ask the judge at various conferences before trial to order things like a request to admit, because oftentimes the opposing person will not want to do anything unless they're ordered to do it, right? Because that's why you're in a contested divorce, because you're relying on the court to order something because the other party's being uncooperative, right?
Amazing.
So that's what I did,
People might think can we really trust AI? And how is it like, is this getting into that place of unauthorized practice of law? Like what people probably feel nervous about using AI.
Yeah.
And so maybe they get a loan to get a lawyer instead. So what can you speak to kind of that for someone's personal legal situation?
Yeah. So basically, what I would say is that, be as transparent as possible from the very start of your case that you're using AI. Here's how you're using it. You're using it for research. You're using this for this. Here's how you're verifying. You look at every output in every case and you make sure you search for it and that it's real, right? Like, here are the mitigation tactics that you're using in order to ensure that what you're submitting is valid. Or you can say, I'm using an AI that, says in their disclaimer that they are designed to avoid lies and hallucinations, right? Because most AIs, they don't say that. They say AI can make mistakes. They actually have the opposite disclaimer, that you cannot rely on AI for anything legal, medical, financial, because it can make mistakes. So you have to really communicate that from the start, so that what happens is the court system and judges basically, they can't then go back and say at trial, oh, you shouldn't have used that, or you shouldn't have done that, because they had every opportunity throughout all your hearings pre-trial to challenge it, or to give you more direction, or to say this one affidavit you filed for this hearing was not good because of this, or what have you. Their whole job is to prepare you for eventually potentially trial if you and the other party don't settle before trial, right?
True. Yep.
So that's essentially it. Yeah.
The future of Alice AI, is it, and the vision behind it, is it to branch out outside of divorce? Is it, where are we going with this?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just starting with Ontario Family Law because that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I have an example case for. And that's what I can communicate from like a marketing perspective and promotional perspective. But eventually we would want to branch out, of course, into other areas of law and into other jurisdictions across Canada, maybe across the US and Europe. Those are all plans for the future for sure. And because the process of law is kind of similar in the sense that it's based on what's happened so far. It's based on what the laws are. And, I think it's important to start small and with what you know, and then test it, prove the product, get some good feedback, get some testimonials, right? And then kind of expand further, right? And Alice is targeted to not just help people who are doing contested divorce, but to also do simulation with, here's based on what you have, on your evidence and what you have available to you, here's what your case could look like, right? Just simulate the whole process, like everything I told you about,
practice
like
through it.
practice through it. Like the AI could talk to you and be like, hey, we're now attending our first case conference, and this is what the judge will say to you, and this is what they will ask you, and these are the orders that the judge could make for disclosure, right? For what information you guys need to all share with each other, right? So based on the inputs, right, it could provide a realistic scenario and simulation, and it could even provide a tally of, like, if you used a lawyer, like, this is how much this would be costing you by then, right? Year 1, year 2.
Wow.
So at a price point where we're looking at is, like right now we're looking at for family law at approximately $500 a month. But again, people will use that for the period that they do their case.
Yep.
But there could be other price points for like smaller things, like small claims court eventually, or landlord and tenant issues, or wills and estates, or other areas of law. And like the companies I mentioned that I'm partnering with, like Formic AI, they have like lawyers that are part of their network and part of the company. So they would be able to provide that advice on, is this structured properly? Is this a realistic scenario, what we're outputting in terms of like based on their years of experience, that this is how exactly it goes. So, and I just think it by allowing and by giving people those simulations, I think people will have a better understanding of the process and then be able to really make a decision like, whoa, if we go this route, like maybe it's better to settle. Maybe it's better to give up this or that, because I know if I go all the way to the end, I'm going to spend this amount of time, this amount of money.
Yeah. You can
And
make
then,
an informed
you know, you
decision.
can make a more informed decision, because a lot of times people are just going in the dark. They're going in blind, and they don't know. And they have, 10 stories from these friends and 10 stories from those friends. And you're like, which one applies the most to me? Everything is custom to you. Everything is custom to the intake that you would input into Alice. And then it would just kind of tell you, here's your score of like, what's your probability? Like,
Wow.
you know what I mean? It would be able to assess that and be able to simulate what it would look like.
Amazing.
So
there's so much here we could unpack.
Yeah.
I have so many more questions I would love to ask you. We're going to pause it here though for today. What I would love, in a moment, I'm going to ask you your final message. But before that, you have a gift for our listeners. Tell us about that.
Yes. So right now we're still in kind of alpha stage with Alice, but we will be soon looking for beta testers once we get into beta, and people who want to use the platform and give feedback. And then, of course, people who want to eventually use it once it's ready and live. I'm offering the first 2 months for free for any of our listeners who sign up on the website, allisonlegalwonderland.com. And then basically when they sign up, they'll get a kind of an automatic email. And if they respond and say they heard about it on this podcast, then they would get the first 2 months free.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. So they can test it out and start to use it and start to get on their journey to maybe defending themselves, being more confident in the process. Amazing. You're doing such amazing work. What's your final message to our audience?
My final message is, I always thought, and probably a lot of people in the audience would answer the same, as I used to think that lawyers and court was all like, law and order and suits, right? And it's actually not. There's a lot of lawyers and law firms that are not that competent and not that savvy, and they're just pushing the paper or the information that one party is providing. They're not verifying a lot of stuff, okay? And because of the way that the system is set up, because the way that Law Society polices itself and doesn't have, the Law Society of Ontario, I'm giving the example, doesn't have like anything transparent about how they reprimand lawyers and what's the bar set, like what do you have to submit in the complaint in order for it to be valid. Like it's a completely blind process, and lawyers are policing themselves essentially, right? And that's the legal system in Canada, right? So even if you run into an incompetent lawyer, even if you run into, it's very, very hard to hold them accountable, right? So you have to be very careful if you do use a lawyer, how you pick one, but also if you decide to go the other route and not use lawyers, you're not like, how should I say? They know a lot more about the process and the procedures and all of that. But at the end of the day, they're not perfect. And, you could get answers from AI that are very aligned with the law and what's possible within the law versus lawyers, like I said, they have their own incentives, they have their own agendas, and there's no accountability. It's just, and same with judges. Judges have something called judicial immunity, which means that they, like if you want to appeal something, or if, let's say they made a bunch of errors in law in your ruling, the only thing you could do is file a complaint with the Canadian Judicial Council, and we don't know how long that takes. It's not transparent. Where does it go? Like, is there any, like you can't sue judges for making mistakes, right? Wow. And they've got piles and piles of cases and work and paperwork, and they're just basically might not be held accountable for making those kinds of mistakes, right? So you really have to do your research, be savvy, advocate for yourself, and use the tools that are now just emerging, right? And are just being built right now that are going to really help you, that literally didn't exist a year ago.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for sharing about Alice in Legal Wonderland. And for all of our listeners, share this episode with a friend. Are you going through a divorce, or do you know someone who is? Please share. We'll make sure that all of Ana's websites, links, everything is in the show notes so that you can easily check that out and get your first 2 months free of Alice AI. And if you haven't yet, please write us a review. And when you do, screenshot it, send it to team@dianerolston.com and with your mailing address, and I'd love to send you something special in the mail. So until next time, stay dynamic. Bye.